Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing? Checking on the post-lunch energy. How's everyone? There you go. Hello, my name is Ramya Chitrakar, and I'm going to be joined today by Jeff Pinkston and David Fantham, and we are from the Microsoft Defender team. Thank you so much for joining us today. So if you are either a security leader, a SOC analyst, or an IT admin who's wondering how AI is going to reshape attack and defense, you're in the right place. Just as defenders are using AI to detect, investigate, and respond to threats, what we are seeing is attackers, well-funded adversaries, are also using AI to create very sophisticated and convincing lures and social engineering attacks that are targeting both humans as well as agents attached to humans. Today, we're going to explore the threat landscape for email and collaboration security tools and see how they're evolving in this age of AI. We'd also talk to you about how to harness the power of Microsoft Defender's AI capabilities to combat these attacks. I always like to start these with some real-world example. Let's talk about an attack that is acting at AI speed to give you a perspective on this one. So moving through the steps. This is an attacker where they use password spray and they're targeting users. They target a bunch of users, they find a user that was reusing a weak password, and their account is compromised. This is the first time where you start to see a signal. You can see above the line, you start to see a signal which is talking about this unfamiliar sign-in properties that was flagged within Defender. So once they are in, they go into stealth mode and actually start to do what is called a malicious OAuth application consent to gain access to OneDrive and other similar resources. Defender XDR's detection agent is able to find this. It's able to detect the suspicious OAuth application consent because our AI models know that this is not a normal behavior for this specific user. Now, once the attacker has that foothold, what they start to do is they create a malicious email rerouting or an email inbox rule to hide certain emails. So think about these are cases such as suspicious, such as security events, emails that come for security events, so that the end user doesn't get suspicious about anything that's going on the surface. Here again, Defender is able to flag this suspicious email inbox manipulation rule and raises that signal. Let's go back to the attacker. What they do after this stage is, now they have control of the account, they have compromised the account, they have hidden their tracks, and now they start to move laterally where they are sending phishing email both internally and externally using this trusted but compromised account. And here is where the email protection stack from Defender is able to find and flag the suspicious email sending patterns. This is unusual volumes, unusual recipients, and even content that we flag as phish, so that gives us confidence and we turn this signal into a high-confident phish signal to raise the alarm to SOC teams. And here is where an AI-powered defense really comes into play. The system automatically correlates these events all the way from the initial password spray to the unfamiliar sign-in activity, to the malicious OAuth application consent that happened, to the inbox manipulation rule, and to then this phishing emails that were sent. Defender is able to mark this user as risky, as well as automatically remove emails from this entire campaign from inboxes. This is literally reaching into the inboxes and removing them for the entire tenant. Now, keep in mind, this entire kill chain, the attack kill chain that I just talked about, from the initial password spray all the way until the organization-wide phishing to the automated cleanup can sometimes happen in as little as 3 minutes. Just digest that, 3 minutes. This is faster than any human can triage tickets. And this is why we rely on AI-driven detection and response, so we are able to act on this so quickly, and we expand this across apps, identities, and email so that we are able to respond to these kind of attacks. Coming to trends. First one is it's a battle of AI versus AI. What we are seeing is attackers are harnessing AI to automate, to customize and accelerate these attacks. They're using these AI-backed phishing platforms to create this very convincing content and code. And as a result, these attacks move at unprecedented speed and scale, and defenders have to keep pace. The second thing we are seeing is, as collaboration platforms are gaining traction, threat actors like Storm 1811 are also aggressively targeting platforms like Microsoft Teams as a threat vector. There is a third one, which is mixed mode attacks, where we are seeing these campaigns that span email and collaboration platforms. What I mean by that is they create this coordinated attack. Let's take an example of a very coordinated spam bombing over email, which are then followed by scam calls over Teams pretending to be help desk. And the goal is to have malware deployed to the endpoint, and they do it at alarming speeds. And this is why it's important to put AI in the hands of defenders so that they stay agile, they keep pace, and even predict what adversaries are going to do. Let's take a zoom out a bit and talk about how exactly we are using AI in our systems. We are using AI as both in our systems layer, as well as we have specialized agents that are able to combat these advanced attack techniques. And here is an interesting pattern we are seeing attackers take. Here is where we are seeing them use AI to scale their operations. First is recon. This is where they are collecting data and they're scanning for data using AI and doing so aggressively. The next is resource development. Here, they are crafting the infrastructure and capabilities at scale. Next is initial access, where they're using these very convincing lures and realistic-looking websites to trick users. And the last one is defense evasion. These are techniques like dynamic content generation, text obfuscation, and decoys so that you're confusing users and tricking them. Now, note this. The selective use of AI by attackers gives them speed and scale. But the same thing creates a blueprint for us so we know the patterns for defense. Our strategy here is very simple. We fight AI with AI. Let's actually walk through a real-world example, and Tycoon is a primary example of an attacker that uses AI to scale their operations. They are a widespread phishing as a service kit who they focus on bypassing multi-factor authentication and use the adversary in the middle techniques. And let's walk through how they are using AI across those 4 stages that I just talked about. First, in resource development, they use AI to craft these convincing lures that are often delivered as PDFs. They use HR workflows. They even use Microsoft company context and fake personas. Next one is initial access, where they deploy QR codes with AI, and they use techniques such as this color grading. They use a chunking of images, and they use links to very real-looking websites. For defense evasion, they use this AI-generated dynamic content and email body obfuscation, so they are bypassing this detection and slowing down response. Just note that our AI-powered defenses are constantly watching and learning and adapting from these patterns, whether it is CAPTCHAs or this visual kind of obfuscation or dynamic decoys, so we can stop these campaigns before they start to become real attacks. Now, switching gears, let's talk about where exactly are we using AI, and we'll talk about this across various layers of our protection stack. Starting with pre-delivery protection. Every incoming message is scanned using these advanced AI models to detect known and emerging threats. And this spans malicious files, links, attachments, and even sophisticated phishing attempts, so we can stop the attack before the email makes it to the end user. But let's be real, attacks are constantly evolving. And defense just can't stop before the inbox. We have to continuously monitor, and we have to prepare for things like delayed weaponization. Here we use techniques such as safe links rechecking and sandbox detonation to neutralize these attacks. The third one is empowering our SOC teams. So here it is bringing automation and intelligence to SOC workflows with features like Security Copilot Phishing Triage Agent and the Microsoft Defender automated investigation and response to reduce manual effort and accelerate response times so SOC teams can focus more on proactive defense. Let's dig a little bit more into the pre-delivery technology that we use. First is content inspection. We have content inspection AI for things like computer vision that can look into PDFs, looking for images that might be hiding some text, hiding QR codes. Then we have natural language processing models, or NLP models, that read emails and understand the intent. This one is really crucial for phishing lures that now don't use traditional artifacts such as links or attachments. Next is our semantic analysis AI models, the large-scale AI analysis models that can understand email language and sentiment. They're able to find text-only fraud like urgent CEO requests or payroll diversion. The AI is able to understand nuances in the text such as sense of urgency or other deceit cues that are in the tone of the email message. Now, moving, as we talked about, we can't stop our defense just pre-delivery. We have to continuously monitor and protect end users even when emails are in their inboxes. Let's talk about a few ways that we do that. First one, we cluster and correlate our signals using AI. Think about it this way. We have seen attackers, what they do is they take emails and make slight modifications. But our clustering AI is able to detect that this email is part of the same campaign, so it can stay stable across such minor mutations of emails. Next is deep content inspection for attachments using sandboxing and using AI models to evaluate these links and files in real time. We are further pushing the frontier for protection by doing things like prompt injection attacks in Microsoft 365 Copilot as an example, and we're doing this so attackers don't abuse AI tools to compromise your organization. Next, let's spend a second to talk about how we are empowering our SOC teams so that they can be faster to respond to threats and really do it more efficiently. One thing that we are investing on in a big way is how we handle user-submitted phish emails. Our new agentic grading is able to analyze these submissions end-to-end and leverage AI across all the signals, whether it is text, whether it is links, or attachments. We are able to deliver fast and very accurate verdicts. And here is the best part. The system provides clear, natural language explanation for all its decisions so that the SOC teams, as well as the end users, understand why a message was flagged. We don't stop there. Because of this agentic system, we are able to build this continuous learning loop. Think of it as a feedback loop, so our protections get smarter and stronger over time. The next one we want to talk about is one thing we commonly hear from our customers and SOC teams is the amount of noise they deal with. And here is where I personally believe that AI has a huge opportunity to increase SOC efficiency. With the Microsoft Defender and the Security Copilot phishing triage agent, we are embedding AI in systems that automate triage, accelerate the response, and provide full transparency in the decisions that are being made. This helps our SOC teams spend less time on this repetitive task, low signal risk, and instead spend their time on more proactive defense. I hope this gives you a sense of how we are combining our advanced AI models and threat intelligence, so we are not just keeping pace with these attackers, we are going to outpace them and we're going to stay ahead. Talked about a lot of our capabilities, but the best part are seeing things in action. And for that, I'd like to invite David Fantham on stage. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ramya. Thank you for being here today, folks. Really excited to showcase exactly what this looks like bottoms up. Some of you might have already seen the phish triage agent this week, but we're going to go deep into a scenario. And just like Ramya said, we've seen attackers use AI at various steps of the kill chain. She talked about reconnaissance, resource development, initial access, even defense evasion. So we must, as Microsoft, enable our SOC to use the same thing to respond. So today, we're going to go bottoms up and take a look at how we're enabling autonomous triage, investigation, and response through agentic AI directly in Defender. Now, you'll see a pretty simple scenario that we're going to use today. Ramya talked about a user-reported phish, but we believe it's meaningful and representative of a challenge that we see SOC deal with on a regular basis. Right? Signal overload, alert fatigue, keeping up with regulatory requirements, whatever it may be, we're here to help you prioritize and focus on the highest risk and shift from being reactive to proactive. Let's dive in. Now today, our SOC can use the built-in tools directly in our incident workflows to understand and triage what happened, going into embedded entities like the email entity experience to find out in a timeline view what occurred, tearing down headers and analysis, looking at attachments, URLs, and even with the right permissions and auditing, get directly to the content, right? Going directly to the core to understand what happened with this message. And at the end of it, with the right analysis, the right experience, and the right time, an analyst can come to the conclusion that this is a bad URL. They want to conclude this is a a true positive, and that the URL pointed to shared infrastructure that had a document that had embedded XPIA. But if we go back to our incident now and show the power of how we can enable our SOC with this agentic AI, we see that a couple things are happening. Before we even get to the triage agent, Copilot has provided a summary of what occurred. In this incident, it's relatively simplistic, but I can tell you once we start multiplying these alerts, it gets much more complicated to understand the graph and stitch the edges together, as well as recommended manual actions directly in line from Security Copilot. But once we get down to the bottom here, this is the first level summary of detail we get from our phish triage agent. It gives you in natural language a summary and a verdict of the reasoning it came to, and it gives you first, second, and third levels of details we're going to dive into of how it came to that conclusion. So diving right in, you can inline in the incident experiences, get to a graphical representation of the flow and the process that this agent took on your behalf to come to its conclusions. As you scroll across this graphical representation, you can see we get to the first level of detail here, right? It talks about how it broke down the content in this message. It looked at the URL, not only TI we have from Defender and MTP, but it sent this off to our detonation chambers to figure out if there's any asynchronous defense evasion that we need to understand and bring back to the context of the investigation. We look at the IP and the sender authentication layer to understand what do we know about the sender, the context, the relationship with the recipient. And then finally, the core of the message we're going to dig into is what do we look at in the body? What's the context? And this is really where the power of this agent can come and help your SOC scale in a way that's meaningful. And I'm going to pause here just for a second and read a portion of this natural language summary that it provides. It says, despite professional formatting and past authentication, the masked phishing URL and disconnected sending infra are strong indicators of malicious intent. Now you can come to this conclusion, and analysts can sit there and wallow in this. They can do the manual investigation and come to this conclusion, but again, it takes time, it takes expertise, and really, I think this is a fantastic demonstration of some of the power of this agent to help your security team scale and truly understand how they can connect the dots to come to these types of conclusions. So as you zoom back out, this is that demonstration of a second level of detail, but we can go a third level deeper. And like Ramya mentioned, this level of transparency about how we come to the reasoning on the agent's behalf allows you to build that level of trust to understand and over time rely on its verdict and reasoning more and more. So as we expand into the investigation of the email itself, you can see it broke it down into 5 steps. And again, these are mimicked based on our interactions with SOC and our customers. It goes off and detonates the content, the URL, or any appropriate attachments. It checked to see if it was a phishing simulation. It looks at the raw content of the email, breaking down headers, HTML, anything in the email itself. It looks at a screenshot using computer vision, and it looks at communication state. So again, what do we know about the context of this relationship between the recipient and the sender graph that sits behind both? And if we zoom back out to the first level of detail here, the last step of the process here for our agents is to do a determination of the alert itself. And this is where the power of the triage and proactive scaling to your SOC is really powerful. So the verdict it came to was this is a true positive. We went to a summary, went to the first level detail, the second level, and the third. But in the case of your SOC coming through and saying, I don't necessarily agree with it, you can help us tune. So directly within these experiences, you can mark the alert as a false positive, you can manage the incidents, or you can give feedback to every step of the agent along the way. So, as we've looked at autonomous triage from the agent, we're now going to pivot over to our automated AIR capability, which runs in parallel in line to this incident experience to help you close the loop, go from triage to investigation and response. And for those of you that haven't operationalized our AIR capabilities yet, what it is it runs in parallel to the agent, examining the triggers and the events that surround this specific alert, and it mimics the investigation patterns of the SOC, answering the question, what else might have happened here? And AIR comes back and provides evidence and response. In this case, we had 8 different entity clusters. It looks at clustering of email around shared infrastructure, similar subjects, similar IP, authentication layers. It looks at URL clusters. And in this case, it came back with a malicious determination around a cluster of similar emails containing that same URL. And now, with policies that admin can configure, you can automatically approve these clusters for remediation. So for this URL in particular, we went from one single submission, triaged by our agents, to automated remediation on our customer's behalf. So again, it's demonstrative. 1 to 10 is a big scale, but if you take this in the context of a large organization, this can be really meaningful in terms of how much efficiency you can gain. Now, we actually did a couple studies here to understand what this means in the context for our customers. So we're going to look at some of these numbers. In the quote, you can see one customer said it saved them nearly 200 hours manually of triage over the course of a month. And these agents identified 6.5 times more malicious alerts at a 77% improved accuracy of their verdicts. And when an agent sits side by side with this triage, when an analyst sits side by side with this agent, they're 53% more of their time spent on malicious alerts. And I know I'm not the first person to say this week, because Judson kicked it off in his keynote, but to make these agents easily accessible and help security teams get started more quickly, we're excited to announce Security Copilot will be available to all Microsoft 365 E5 customers. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Jeff to talk about teams as well as mixed mode attacks.
Thanks, David. Well, I hope some of the AI technologies we're showing you will give you more confidence that you can combat those threat actors out there that are trying to compromise your environments. I'm going to jump to Microsoft Teams, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as a new vector by which threat actors are trying to compromise. Now, Teams is a really fantastic platform. It has a lot of rich capabilities that allow you to chat, share content over channels, URLs, file attachments. It also enables you to have calls, meetings, voice, and video. But with that rich set of capabilities, the threat landscape is increasingly complex. And so you've got to think about the protections that are needed, and they've got to be across all of these dimensions. Let's just take a few as an example. So just like email, URLs and attachments can be accessed through chats and channels, and those could be malicious that a user could access and could compromise their system. Teams has a very extensible and robust app environment. A threat actor could build an app, and with that app, gather information or even potentially gather credentials. Of course, I talked about meetings and calls. The social engineering impact there is pretty dangerous in terms of the lure that could happen. What makes that in particularly more threatening, more scary, is that AI is being used, as Ramya talked about, to make sure that those attacks, whether it's voice or video, or even in chat, are very personalized, or that they can even potentially impersonate your manager, your manager's manager. We look and talk about deep fakes, where both voice and video are being generated to lure victims to share information that they should not share. So we've got to think about protections across all of these various aspects. Teams is a powerful tool to use, but it's also a powerful place for threat actors to take advantage. So let's talk about some of the protections that we do offer already. We'll continue to improve and add more as we continue to evolve the product. So first and foremost, if you have URLs or attachments, we'll continue to protect those, block those. We'll run those in Sandbox and be able to detect when there might be potentially malicious content. We also will warn a user. So if there is a malicious URL in a message, we'll show a little warning and indicate to the user that the URL could be unsafe. We will also zap or remove malicious messages once we detect that there is something that could compromise the user. We have various controls in place, very granular controls where for a given sender or a given user and or a given domain, you can block them from even having access to collaborate with users in your environment. Now for the SOC, we allow users to actually submit malicious messages so that the SOC can investigate. We will also generate alerts so that they will show up in the queue for a SOC to investigate. We also provide data that's integrated into our advanced hunting capabilities in XDR, and SOC analysts can write queries against various activities that are happening in teams. Let me show you a few examples. So in this first example, you'll see here where the little, hopefully you're not colorblind, you'll see the red warning that indicates that this message has a malicious URL. Now we know how users are. They all like to tempt fate. There's always one user out there who still likes to click on the link. And in that case, at time of click, we will still analyze the URL. We'll still look at the content, do deep content exploration. And if we detect that it's malicious, we'll still prevent that content from infecting that user's device or compromising their credentials. The last example I'll show you is the fact that if a threat actor uploads malware into Teams, into a channel, or into a chat, we will detect that and we will remove that content from within Teams. So we've talked about Teams. We've talked about how this is becoming an important place for threat actors to try and compromise. Ramya mentioned this, mixed mode, where threat actors are becoming very sophisticated and combining both email and Teams to perform various social engineering attacks. I'm going to walk you through a real-world set of recent attacks that were performed by a threat actor that we classify as Storm 1811 and Storm 1674. They're also known out there as 𝗦𝗽𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀. This is a threat actor that will try to compromise critical systems and then use ransomware to collect a ransom. This attack starts by the threat actor first creating a real M365 tenant. And they'll use that tenant to do exploration, to do reconnaissance and find potential targets and victims. When they've identified a target, they will then do what we call mail bomb. They will send numerous emails. It could be 1,000 within an hour. Now, what's interesting is they're blatant phishing emails. They will say something like, please reset your password, please activate this account. The threat actor is trying to create a sense of scare and fear in the victim and trying to also create a sense of urgency. And then within a short time window, it could be within minutes, the threat actor will then send a chat in Teams, or they'll even try to make a call. And they will impersonate being the IT help desk. And of course, if you're a user and your IT help calls and you think that IT help desk is saying, hey, I see that you've got a surge of emails, looks like there's some phish, we'd like to help you. Of course, you're going to respond and say, yes, please. And so at that point, the threat actor will then convince the user to run something like Quick Assist or to install remote apps or a remote access tool. And at this point, the threat actor now has on-hands keyboard access. And at that point, they're harvesting credentials, they're doing network scans, they're looking for other systems that this user has, they're moving laterally. They're trying to get to the domain controller. Once they get to the domain controller, they can flood the network with a DC sync. They can then use that to distribute malware. And at this point, they've now put a company at extreme risk, and they're basically trying to collect money. So how do we disrupt this in Defender? Well, let me just walk you through a few of the capabilities that we have that will help in dealing with these types of sophisticated attacks. First, within XDR, when we detect that a user's identity has been compromised or that on particular devices that malware has been installed, we provide tools, and in many cases you can automate this to both disable the account or require a change in password, and then quarantine the devices so that they don't even have network access. But we want to continue to shift left and move upstream. And so we are going to continue to look for cross-email teams, different types of AI models and capabilities where we can look at senders and tenants and discover where they're trying to penetrate in the environment. And then continue to move left, where we look for brand impersonation, or even if there are URLs or attachments that are being used to try and compromise the device. And ultimately, the biggest shift left is to stop the mail bomb attack from the beginning. If we can get up front and prevent the mail from even showing up to the end user, then the threat actor has not succeeded. Obviously, they'll move on to someone else, but we can at least protect this particular user from being compromised. In order to do this, it requires protections across multiple layers. Obviously, we want to detect pre-delivery, whether you're in Teams or in email. We want to prevent the user from even being distracted by potential attacks. Now, in the cases where some attacks are more subtle, or where a URL or an attachment is benign until it's armed, then we also need to have capabilities that are post-delivery detection and post-delivery response. And then ultimately, what we're really trying to do is to empower the SOC so that they have insights, they can detect, they can analyze, and they can remediate. We've talked a lot about how AI is powering that. It's already powering that in pre-delivery, and we want to further empower that through things like the phish triage agent to the SOC. Now, to help demonstrate this further, I'm going to invite David back out, and he's going to do a demo to illustrate mixed mode.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah. Happy to be back. All right, demo number 2. All right, so we're going to take a look at an incident here, but like Jeff said, really what we've seen is attackers are trying to take advantage of this digital space in between different types of communication and enterprise collaboration. And what we try and do is give you not only that differentiated protection between email and Teams and the extension into XDR, but also integrated investigation and response. All of it has to live directly where you already work in the Defender portal. And in this demo, we're going to take a look at not only the IR capabilities, but we're going to jump into how we now expose critical data over advanced hunting for your SOC team to understand, investigate, and respond as well. Let's dive in. So directly within this incident, the way I think about it is you don't know what you can't see. So when attackers are moving between these modalities, we have to help you be able to stitch together their movement. And in this case, we only saw 2 different detections, starting with the mail bomb that Jeff illustrated, and moving to that next attempt, trying to purport that they're help desk or IT support on Teams, but it could have been worse. There could have been compromise of the user, the lateral movement over to the DC, and all the way ending up with ransomware. In this case, it ended, but we stitched together that story for you. The detection for mail bombing shows up directly in line, and all these things really help the SOC understand and answer a critical question. Did this attack end with this user, or did it move somewhere else? In this case, it only got as far as that kind of Teams initiation and impersonation, which, by the way, we have impersonation protection directly in line in Teams, like Jeff highlighted. So we'll provide a warning to the end user before they accept the external contact to say, this appears to be phishing. They can preview the content before they look at the URLs or it's accessible, and have a little bit more context around the communication that's coming their way from someone external. In this case, because there are no more detections, and we'll see in a second in advanced hunting, the attack did stop here, in fact, but we've seen attackers move. As Jeff highlighted, they're crafty, they've always been crafty, but we've seen them do reconnaissance and then initiate access from a different tenant, a trial tenant in particular, so we plugged that hole in settings. We've seen them do the classic impersonation techniques using ASCII, Unicode, Cyrillic characters, so we plugged that hole. We've seen them do things like trying to shove external tags out of the contact card, so we plugged that hole. Over the course of us tracking this, really it's been a bit of cat and mouse, but ultimately, where they move, we try and defend, and then after we defend, we tell you the story. So now that we've kind of covered a bit of how we have detection coverage across the beginning of this kill chain of mixed mode attacks from the mail bomb to email, let's dive into how we expose some of this really critical depth of detail in advanced hunting now. One thing to call out here, we have 3 new tables in advanced hunting that cover Teams data. So if you haven't seen it yet, there's one covering message data, URL data, and post-delivery events. It covers all external communication, so people in chats outside of your org, and all internal messages that contain URLs. And before we start diving into the depth of this hunt, I'm going to call out the left side of this. So whether you are just getting started in KQL or you're a seasoned veteran, community queries are awesome. We recently republished about another 150 queries coming from our customers, our partners, or MVPs. So if any of you are in the room, thank you very much. Today, we're going to start this hunt from one of those queries. Looking at the query itself, it's not a super sophisticated one, and we know we're going to get results because we just saw it as a part of the incident response and incident itself. We're going to look for display names that contain suspicious words coming from an external sender. Right, all this is done directly within the 2 new tables in advanced hunting. And when we run the query, we see that our recipient that had the mail bomb attack come his way had 2 separate external contacts coming in, one purporting to be help desk and one purporting to be IT help desk. And because we have both inbound and outbound communication, one, we can answer the question, did they respond? Which is fantastic. We see no reply here as a part of this query. But with a simple modification, thanks to what Jeff already covered about how we now have safe links, time of click integration into all Teams clients natively, with one additional line of, was there a click on this URL? We can answer the next question, which is, was there exposure? Did they actually get to the content? And with one run, we can see the answer is no, a very quick no, but we can see the answer is no. There were no clicks on that URL. And that extends not only into Teams, but it's already been natively in email and all the M365 apps for quite some time. So we've looked at exposure. We've answered the question, did they reply? Did they access the content? Now we can move on to mitigation and response, both of which can happen directly inline in advanced hunting. For the URL, admins can submit that back to Microsoft. So they can submit the URL to us. We redetonate, we learn, and then we can block any future URLs coming in, not only in Teams, but also in email and throughout the M365 and MTP ecosystem. You can directly inline manage indicators. In this case, you can add it to the Microsoft Defender tenant allow block list. So these URLs will no longer be allowed into your organization and blocked at time of click. Again, we natively integrated this not only in Teams, but in email. And a quick plug, you can also now block domains and soon to be senders and users in Teams as well. And now that we moved on from the URL, we also can help with remediation for that same chat. So directly inline, we have all the context and information about that chat, details about when it happened, how it happened, who it happened, what conversation was it in, and you can do inline remediation. So in this case, under the take action button, we can remove that user from the conversation. And this is really powerful. Coupling this with those tenant allow block list actions we just talked about for mitigation, not only can you understand the context of the attack, you can cut it off, and then you can remove your internal users from those conversations. So a couple of clicks, you stipulate who you want the recipient to be, what conversation you want them to remove from, and you give a little extra detail because this shows up in the action history here in Defender as well. So we've gone through exposure, we've understood the investigation, we've mitigated the URL, we've remediated the user itself. Now we're going to go all the way back to closing the loop to posture. And this isn't something that's unique to the team scenario, but it's really powerful. We talk a lot to our customers about creating custom detection rules. This helps you take that learning in the context of this incident and bringing it back to being preventative, so kind of bolstering the posture within your organization. So I'm going to create a custom detection rule that looks for that exact same query, name it a multimodal attack, someone impersonating Teams chat, help desk, IT support, cyber, and I'm going to run it every hour. And what this will do is, after I stipulate a little bit more about the severity, the category I want it to run on, I can associate it MITRE techniques. I can even give whoever responds to this recommended actions for how we want them to perform their investigation. Give a little more information, and then most importantly, we can do entity mapping. So this is an awesome capability for extension out into any of you that use SIEMs and SOARs, but you can dictate what type of context you want to give as a part of this custom detection. One more click, we're published, and we're done. In closing, we went from the IR and detection coverage from mixed mode attacks to full exposure and investigation directly in advanced hunting. We understood that there was no reply, there's no exposure to content, clicks on URLs. We put remediation and mitigation in place for that specific URL, and we removed the user from the chat. Finally, close the loop by putting a detection back in place. So really powerful, all within one workflow. I will kind of give a nudge. If you haven't already taken a look at some of these capabilities for Microsoft Teams, please do. It's an awesome capability, and I'm going to pass it back to Jeff to close this out.
Great. Thanks, David. Great. So we'll wrap it up. We probably have time for one or two questions, but I just want to encourage a few things. Number one, I know email has been a vector for attack for years. I encourage you to look at Teams and to put energy into both your posture, your controls, as well as your processes for how you react, and also in terms of even training your users on how to be aware of the potential attack vectors that happen there. Second, if you're an M365 E5 customer, I encourage you to try out the Phish Triage agent. That is one of many more agents we plan to build that will help SOC in their prioritization, remediation, detection, et cetera. So I encourage you to look at that. And with that, I'll invite Ramya and David back up. And as I said, the mic is over here, and we probably can handle one or two questions. We're going to get cut off in about 4 minutes. All right, we have a victim.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I just wanted to see if I could get a little more color about what the Phish Triage agent doesn't that AIR currently does.
Want me to speak to that?
Great. Sorry, I did not hear. Did you hear?
The question was the difference between, I'll just summarize it, please tell me if I got it right, the difference between what the phishing triage agent does and what the automatic investigation and response does. So I'll say it briefly, feel free to chime in. Think of the Phish Triage agent as its ability to reason over individual messages at a time that the SOC team is looking at. It looks at a mail, it's able to say whether it is malicious or benign. AIR is then able to take that same learning and then expand it and find similar such clusters of email and then automate the response for it by quarantine email in that entire campaign. Does that make sense? So think of it as a learning loop where the Phish agent is using AI, of course, to come up with a verdict. We use that verdict and then apply it to broad clusters of similar email so we can expand that capability and quarantine emails.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
All right, any other questions? Oh, I have one.
One more.
Victim number 2.
So around the question of the multi-mode attack, are you taking any preemptive actions that allow these individuals to set up these ad hoc tenants to perform those attacks?
Yeah, we have a pretty robust fraud center where they have their own AI technologies to do detection on fraudulent accounts that are being set up. We see, particularly with trial accounts, because threat actors like to create a tenant and then run away from it, come back to it. Personal example, my daughter ended up getting compromised about 4 weeks ago and cost me a small fortune. But it was literally through a valid tenant. Obviously, it was through Gmail, because of course Microsoft would not have compromised her. But we have a pretty robust fraud department, and they actually work with Google, Yahoo, et cetera, for those types of identifying threat actors and then shutting them down.
Yeah, because I didn't really understand that piece of it in the beginning, but then it made total sense that they were, so instead of trying to impersonate coming from a tenant, they were actually using a tenant. So they were actually using your tool to help them hack us.
That's exactly
the piece
right.
to keep in mind, if I can add, Pinky, is in addition to, we gave you an example where they were using an account and sending this blast of emails, email bombing, but they are smart enough to know how to just stay under the radar. Right. So they're very sophisticated in terms of how they get at it, so they know how to just, and as we adjust our thresholds, they go further below. So they know just about enough of how to come, so we have to constantly keep evolving.
Wonderful. Great. Thanks.
Great.
Awesome presentation. Thank you.
All right, looks like we're out of time. Thank you all.
Thank you all for your time.
Take care.
concludes the session. Thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of Microsoft Ignite.